Hi. So I have the Akashic records open right now, and I have had some questions kind of lingering, circulating in my mind, kind of in my subconscious. Like, I didn't really articulate these questions in my head. They were kind of just floating vaguely around. And I just got some insight, like a perspective from the Akashic records, from the masters, teachers, and loved ones. And I thought that I would create a video. And I actually decided to record it because I didn't feel like writing it down because I felt lazy. Yeah, it just felt easier to speak. And so I thought, if I'm going to speak it, I might as well record it. And that way, if it's, if it ends up being coherent, or if I feel like it has value, then I can share it. So with that in mind, please know that I have my own Akashic records open. These are, this is my Akashic practice. So I'm not telling you that this will apply to you. There's in no way, I'm not declaring that this will apply to you, that this will feel true or relevant to you. And so I invite you, by all means, listen. And if it does feel pertinent to you, take it in. Feel free to take it in and think about it. And if it doesn't feel relevant to you, if it feels false, then yeah, let it go. By all means, please let it go. Don't feel obligated to take this in. I have no way of knowing if this is true or not. This is just what's coming through me, and I likely will spend time after I close the records thinking about it and deciding if I like it and if I want to take it in. So yeah, with all that in mind, that was just like a reminder that you have sovereignty over what you choose to absorb and believe and accept as truth. So yeah, we will dive in. So I often say that there is no such thing as good or bad. There is no such thing as good or bad. It just is. And this is something that I felt to be true, that I would say this before I was able to open the Akashic records, before I had an Akashic practice, before I knew what the Akashic records were. I would say this. And I've heard other spiritual teachers say this as well. And after I developed my Akashic practice, this is something that the masters, teachers, and loved ones say too. They often say there is no such thing as good or bad. And yet they are providing another way to look at this other than that way. So, and that's something that is kind of hard to grasp, because it's like there's no such thing as good or bad. So in one way, one way that perspective can serve us is it helps us observe things from a kind of detached point of view, and it helps us reorient our perspective. It's like it's shifting. It helps, for me, in my experience, remembering this, that there is no such thing as good or bad, helps me shift the way that I'm looking at something. If I'm looking at something as a negative thing, if something bad is happening to me, and I remind myself there is no such thing as good or bad, it just is, then I can remember, okay, it's not that this is bad, it's that I'm looking at it to be bad, but I have that same ability to look at the same thing as good. I can just choose to see it as good. And yeah, it sometimes takes work to see certain things as good, because they really lend themselves to to seem bad or appear bad. So that does, require practice and devoted effort, certainly. Because we live on earth where duality is a thing. So it's, yeah, and that is to serve my next point. Like, the whole point of this message that's coming through is like, okay, so, in the spiritual community, we know like there is no such thing as good or bad. And yet there is good and bad. There is good and bad. And it's a total paradox. So it's like, I can say there's no such thing as good or bad, but like, sometimes you feel good and sometimes you feel bad. Like, it's true. And like, I'm sure every person could attest to that. Like, certain things feel really good and certain things feel not so good. They don't feel good, they feel bad. And so, I apologize if you heard that sound in the background. But yeah, it's like, what are we pursuing? Like, what is the point every day? What are you doing every day? And it's likely that you're just trying, you might, well, there's a few possibilities. One is that you're just doing what needs to be done, what you feel needs to be done. As society has told you, you need to be doing certain things, or you tell yourself you need to be doing certain things. You are going to your job and doing your job because that's what you feel has to be done. And you might not like it, but you do it. But outside of those types of circumstances, it's like, what are children doing? That's a great way to look at it. It's like, what are kids doing? They don't have like as many societal obligations as we do. Adults do. And so what are children doing all day with no obligations? They don't have to be doing anything. What are they doing? They're playing. They're doing whatever they want to do. And those things that they want to do are the things that make them feel good. They are in a perpetual search for the feelings of joy, of peace, of fulfillment, of happiness. That's all they're doing. Every action a kid is doing is in service to obtaining those feelings. And even when they're crying or tantruming, it's like, why are they crying? Why are they tantruming? Why are they screaming? It's because they are not getting what they want, and what they want will give them that sense of happiness or peace or fulfillment. They're crying and screaming in the middle of the store because their parent won't buy them a candy bar, and they know that that candy bar will taste good and it'll make them feel happy. So that's why they're crying. Or it's whatever they're doing. It's like they're either in that space of feeling very good and happy, or they are trying to get it. They're doing whatever it takes, whatever they can feasibly do, whatever they can get away with to obtain those feelings. And yeah, when they can't get those things, when they're punished or whatever, they're denied those things, they're upset. And expressing that upsetness is also in service to getting those things. And even, little children know when they feel good and when they feel bad. In fact, they probably know better than most adults when they feel good and when they feel bad, because they haven't been desensitized by like societal conditioning and like school and work to know like how they feel at any given moment in time. So again, so we say there is no such thing as good or bad, and yet all humans are very familiar with these experiences that can be classified as good or bad. It can be separated. And sometimes, certainly, there are things in between when you feel happy and sad at the same time, and those are different. That's not what I'm talking about at this moment. However, it's like, what What are we constantly pursuing? We're pursuing at our core, as children, and without any distortion, what we are seeking, what we are trying to get is happiness, is these feelings that we associate as or label good. So yeah, again, happiness, joy, fulfillment, peace. And so then you can wonder, like, okay, well, why are certain things, why do we perceive certain feelings to be good and certain feelings to be bad? Like, we could, if you ask most adults, it's like, would you rather feel peaceful or would you rather feel anxious? I'm sure most of them will say they'd rather feel peaceful. And why is that? It's because feeling peaceful feels good. It's good, right? But it's like, yeah, what does that mean? Why is it good? It's because it feels good to your body and your mind. That's what it ultimately boils down to. It's like the feeling of happiness, the feeling of peace, of joy, of contentment, of fulfillment, all of those feel good to the body and the mind. It's all based on this vessel right here, this like physical thing that you are sitting inside of. You, the soul, are inside temporarily a physical human vessel. And this vessel knows that this vessel experiences certain feelings as good and it experiences other things as bad. It experiences anxiety as bad, as stressful, as contractive. It releases chemicals, like anxiety comes into the mind, it's experienced in the mind, and then the mind responds by telling the body to release certain chemicals that make the rest of the body feel bad. So it's like the body and mind, we know are very connected. They're completely intertwined. And this is backed up by tons of science. It's like the gut is like the second brain, basically. So, yeah, and there's tons of other like stuff. If you want to go into that, you can. That's like basically what Ayurveda is all about, is the mind-body connection. So if your mind is healthy, your body will be healthy. If your body's healthy, the mind will be healthy. That's basically like the crux of Ayurveda. So yeah, so it's like the body and the mind experience certain things, certain feelings as good or bad. And so if we were wired differently, if we experienced anxiety and chaos as a good feeling, we would be completely different, right? Our motivation and our actions would be totally different. We would be actively pursuing scenarios that made us feel anxious and chaotic. And so again, so it's like there really is no such thing as good or bad. It's all how you perceive it. So human beings perceive, peace, joy, fulfillment, etc. as good, and it experiences anxiety, chaos, sadness, grief as bad. And there's the reason that is because of the chemical reactions in the body. So it's like happiness is not good or bad. Anxiety is not good or bad, but humans experience those things as good and bad, so respectively. So it's like, while ultimately, if you go way, way up at the top, from a Akashic perspective, there is no good or bad. It's true. But at the human perspective, there very much is good and bad. Our entire human existence it revolves around these feelings of good and bad. The body, like, that is what evolution is. It's like, as we evolved, certain things made us feel good, certain things made us feel bad, and that's just how the body was designed. It's like you're a soul inside a body, and this body happens to respond to certain things as good and certain things as bad. And so you might be wondering, well, like, okay, what's the point? Because that's what I was wondering. They were telling me all these things, and I was like, okay, what's your point? Like, I get it. Yeah. Ultimately, there's no good or bad. To a human, there is good and bad. And if we were wired differently, different things might feel good and different things might be bad. It could be completely reversed. It's arbitrary, honestly. It's not that feeling peaceful is actually good. It's just that we think it's good because it feels good in our body. Like, it's come to be known in human, like, existence, like, that peace is good. Like, pretty much the world over. I don't know of a society that thinks of feeling peaceful as a bad thing. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I just don't know of it. But yeah, and the reason that that's such a, like, I was gonna say universal, it's not universal. The reason it's like a worldly, like in the human collective consciousness, peace is good is because our bodies respond to the feeling of peace positively. Our muscles are relaxed when we feel peaceful. There's serotonin and dopamine being released in our bodies when we're peaceful. You can take a full deep breath. The body is completely oxygenated when we breathe deeply, and we can breathe deeply when we feel peaceful. So it's like our body is in a good state of being when we feel peaceful. So yeah, humans associate peace as like with good, with feeling good. It's like good, peace, they're equals. So yeah, it's like, what's the point? So they're saying our entire human existence is built around these ideas of good and bad to a human are completely determined by what feels good in the body. It's completely dictated by the body and the mind. But the body more so than the mind. So it's like, you know, your mind is tricky. So it can come to think of like an anxiety inducing situation, something that makes the body feel bad. Your mind can talk you into thinking of that thing as a good thing. And that's why like people will go like skydiving and do these like things that give them adrenaline or whatever. But even that, it's like, well, the adrenaline rush feels good, so they do it, even though like it's not really safe or peaceful or whatever. But it's all determined by the body, and the mind can like convince you to do things that don't feel good to the body. So ultimately, the masters, teachers, and loved ones are saying that the body is the ruler. It is like the master of this existence, because you're inside the body. The soul is inside the body. And so you the soul has to be in service to the body because that's where it's living right now. You know, you're borrowing this body, which is just like an animated piece of clay, basically, with like, that's all it is. It comes into form and it'll go away, and the soul will remain. It existed before the body, it'll exist after, but right now it's inside the body. So the human experience is completely revolving around the body. And so they're saying like, if ever you feel out of alignment, if ever you feel unsure, if you're not sure what your purpose is, what your dharma is, how to find it, and if you don't know if it's your own, like if it's spirit talking to you or whatever, there's all these different cases where uncertainty lives in our lives. The fastest way to come back in or to know, is the spirit talking to me or is this the mind? Because that's the question that was lingering in my mind. I often wonder, is this the masters, teachers, and loved ones talking, or is it my mind talking? It's hard for me to discern. Right now it's them. So but it's like, how do you know? And the best way, they're saying, to know that, to know those things, what your purpose is, or how to feel aligned, or how to know who's talking, is to just notice how your body feels. And I'm like, this is something that they just told me, today, right now. And so I'm like very much looking forward to putting this into practice, because a lot of the time I don't know. I'm like, I don't know what to do about this thing. There's like a million times a day I feel like, oh yeah, I don't know what I should do. But it's like, okay, well, if you have a few options, and they're saying if you have a few options, it's like, okay, well, I could either eat this thing for lunch or I could eat this other thing for lunch. And I'm like, I don't know which one I want. It's like, just consider one option at a time and then notice how your body feels as you consider that thing. And there's your answer. It's that simple. And there was this whole other thing that they like explained, and I might get into that, but like, first, this is the point. So I want to like discuss this a little bit further to make sure it's clear, and then I'll like go into this other like long, convoluted, potentially controversial explanation they gave me. But so it's like, if you feel like you're off, things aren't working out for you, like one after another, like obstacles are in your way, and you're just not sure how to come back into alignment, it's like, consider what your options are. Make note. You can even list it out. Write out a list. Like, maybe you have 4 options of what you could do in life. It's like, you could stay at your job, you could leave your job, you could stay at your job and start like a side project for fun, whatever the situation may be. I don't know. That was just an example. But it's like, mull those options over, like consider it. It's like, okay, if I were like, option A is to just stay in my job. It's like, think about how that would be, what that would feel like. What would it feel like to live that option? Just imagine that. And then after you've done that for like a minute, just notice how your body feels. Does it feel constricted? Do you feel something tight in your gut? Right now, just explaining that example, I was imagining what it would be like to have a full-time job, and my stomach feels tight. And that I wasn't even imagining myself working in a specific job, which, if this is happening to you in your life, you would likely have specifics of what to imagine. But just for me, just the vague idea of having to do any job was enough to make my stomach tighten. So it's like, clearly I don't want to do that. That is not like, working a full-time job does not equate to peace for me, or fulfillment, or joy, or happiness. So that was like a clear, hilarious little example for me. But and then it's like, consider what it would be like to quit your job. Maybe that sparks the same feeling of contraction and fear. Maybe you feel scared and your muscles feel tight, or you feel like a surge of energy that does not feel good, or a tightness in your chest, or a lump in your throat, etc. Or maybe you feel out of breath. Notice your breathing too. That's a great way, like a great like gateway into noticing how your body feels. Did you stop breathing? Is your breathing very shallow? Or are you like completely relaxed? Are your shoulders up here, or are they down? How do you feel? How do you feel? Because maybe it's like, okay, maybe leaving your job isn't the right thing to do either. Staying at your job clearly wasn't the right option in this made-up example. But maybe, staying in your job was not the right thing to do, but maybe leaving your job isn't the right thing to do either. And maybe it's option C, where it's like, okay, you stay in your job, but you start doing something else, whatever that something else may be. Maybe it's like you crochet for fun in the evenings, and perhaps you turn that into a side hustle somehow in the future. But how does that feel? Well, maybe it feels a little bit more fulfilling, a little bit happy to you, and maybe your body feels a little bit more relaxed because you have the safety of your job, but you have the happiness and joy that crocheting brings you. So yeah, just like use that as like a practical exercise of how to determine what is in alignment and what is not in alignment. Because I feel like often spiritual teachers will say like act in alignment or live in alignment or live from your heart or whatever, like any number of like these combinations of words that mean the same thing. They say how to do that, but it's like, okay, well, how the fuck do I actually do that? I wonder that. I'm like, I don't know how to live in alignment. But yeah, so the master teachers and loved ones are giving us like a very practical way of doing that, of discerning what is in alignment and what is not in alignment. The key to that discernment is the body. So yeah, if you just notice how that feels, how these different options feel. For me, my thing was like, yeah, sometimes in my personal practice, I don't know if it's the masters, teachers, and loved ones talking or if it's my mind talking. And they're like, okay, well, just let it come through and then consider it. It's like after you've like closed the records even, it's like consider it. So if you're getting a message from spirit and then your mind jumps in and is like, oh wait, that's not them, or like you can't channel, you don't know what you're doing, you don't like, that's not a message from them, you aren't intuitive, blah blah blah, your mind might jump in. So, or your mind can take that opportunity and like completely distort it and say bad things are going to happen to you, this could never happen, it's too good to be true, etc. So what you can do in that moment, if that situation arises, it's like consider what the first message was and then consider what your mind said. And in that situation you won't know, because that's the whole point of like doing this exercise, is you don't know which one was true or which one was your highest self speaking or the masters, teachers, and loved ones speaking, and you don't know which one was the mind. So just consider both the messages and notice how your body feels. And something that the masters, teachers, and loved ones said is like, if you're very still, it always comes back to these same principles. It's like if you're very still, there will always be at least a subtle reaction to everything that happens. Your body, your energy body, is always reacting. It can't exist any other way. It has to react to everything that's happening. Your energy shifts so quickly, moment to moment. Moment to moment, it's like constantly a reflection of what's going on, of how the body feels to what's going on, how you feel, how your soul feels to what's going on. So yeah, it might be that you're doing this exercise and you don't notice a difference. You can't tell if your body feels tight or relaxed. And they're saying if that's the case, then practice. And that's why, again, it's like, why do we do meditation? You know, why do we have a daily spiritual practice? It's to come into the frequency of stillness, so that way you can observe objectively what's happening, so you can see clearly what's going on. So it's one of the way that meditation and presence serves us. It's like all you have to do is be present. Which it's like, okay, that's kind of a tall order. It's not like all you have to do is be present. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of a challenge most of the time. But that's the way you know, like that's how you can tune in with your body, is by first being present. So, and it takes practice, just like everything else. So, and they're saying like, if you have a daily practice, you know, it's like, okay, maybe it's like, just do it throughout the day. Just like pause throughout the day and check in and be like, hey, body, how do you feel? How are you feeling right now? Sitting at this desk. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, my body actually isn't feeling good doing this. Or it's like, do you feel good? Like, do you want to eat something? You just kind of have to check in. And this is something that I learned like this this concept of checking in is something that Lindsay Mack like talks about often. So she's, yeah, one of my teachers, and so I'm borrowing this concept from her, but I have integrated it into my life. So I'm not just stealing from her, it's something that I do. So, but I did get it from her, so I wanted to credit her appropriately. So yeah, she often says it's just like, just check in, and you can ask your highest self about stuff, but in this specific thing, it's like, ask your body how it feels about certain things, or just observe how your body feels. You don't have to ask it because it's not gonna say anything, but it's just like an opportunity to notice how your body feels when you're in different scenarios. So yeah, if you are doing something that you know is fun for you, or is peaceful for you, or is fulfilling, if you can like have the awareness in that moment to be like, oh hey, I'm doing something that feels good to me right now. How does my body feel during something that feels good? It's just take a note of it. It's like, oh, okay, well, when I'm doing something that feels good, it's like, yeah, maybe you are breathing more deeply, maybe you like feel relaxed, maybe your shoulders are down. I don't know what it is. It could be a million different things. Or maybe you feel like a surge of energy like pulsing through you, and that's what feeling good feels like for you. It's going to feel different to different people. And then, yeah, if you have the awareness or presence of mind when something bad is happening, or when you feel bad, just take note of how that feels. And then when you are when you're in that moment of practicing, contemplating two different options or multiple different options, you'll already have an idea of what the feeling of good feels like to your body, and what the feeling of bad feels like to your body. I don't know if that made sense, but it's basically just like taking time throughout the day to just notice how your body feels. That's how you start integrating presence and becoming familiar with what feels good and bad to your body. And then as you keep practicing every day, considering different options, making decisions, moving through life as we all have to, it's like you'll just be better at like letting your body guide you by noticing what feels good to it, what feels bad to it, and making decisions from that place. Because it's like we all want to make decisions from a place of alignment, but it's like, well, how do you know it's aligned? The body is the guide. Okay. So yeah, that was like a very long explanation or long-winded way of just saying that your body is the guide. Yeah, I have no idea if that made sense. They did like explain this long thing to me, but I don't feel like it's relevant right now to discuss that, and it feels like very convoluted and confusing, and I feel like what I just explained was already probably confusing enough. Hopefully it was clear enough actually that you could like understand what I was saying, but I know it was kind of scattered here and there. But anyway, I did my best. Hopefully it made sense. And again, if that doesn't, sit well with you, if that doesn't feel good in your body, this whole message that I just shared, then throw it away. But yeah, and if you feel like it serves you, by all means, take it, use it, put it into practice. I'm excited to, dive deeper into this practice. Because I do, like I said, it's like they just told me this, but I'm already kind of doing it. But I think for me, it's like throughout the day, I'm checking in, and I'm like, okay, I check in with like my highest self. It's like I'm checking in with the Akashic records throughout the day. But they're saying another way of checking in with the Akashic records is to check in with your body. That's basically the message. So if you feel like you can't, and this is the other thing, it's like if you are trying to communicate with spirit or God or source or the universe, etc., etc., fill in the blank with your own word. If you're trying to communicate with a higher power or your highest self and you feel like you can't, then I hope you feel very empowered and capable of of communicating with your body. Everyone can do that. Most everyone can do that. So if it feels out of reach or out of your ability, or your mind is telling you you can't, you're not intuitive, you don't have the ability to check in, with the masters, teachers, and loved ones, with God, etc., then I really hope you feel empowered and capable of checking in with your body, and you can know that it is the same thing. It's the same thing. Your body and the Akashic records are deeply in tune with each other. So there's so much deep wisdom inside your vessel. Your vessel was designed to carry a soul. It was designed to carry a soul, which is a piece of God. So it's, I called it an animated piece of mud earlier, but it's a very high-tech, thing. It's a very advanced, exquisite piece of technology, basically. And it knows, it's very deeply in tune with the Akashic records, with the higher power, with your highest self. It was designed masterfully. So yeah, I hope you feel like you can trust your body's wisdom. And I hope this made sense, and I wish you a beautiful day. Namaste.